The ribber on my artisan knitting machine is misbehaving, and the problem is one that is pretty ordinary on any knitting machine. So the artisan will give us a great example to show you what to look for if you have this problem. Here's what's happening. It knits reliably in one direction but not the other. With the 0, 1 buttons both set to 0, the ribber carriage should slip going both directions. And that is what it's doing. It's performing that function correctly. You do see a little bit of action in the needles, but that's not enough to either make stitches or drop stitches. When we move both buttons to 1, it should knit going both directions. And you can see that going left, it will do so. Going right, it's still slipping. Let's look underneath. We begin in the 0, 0 position, go to 1, that lever responded correctly. Go to 1 on the other side, whoops, it didn't respond correctly. Plus, when I try to manipulate it, I can feel that it's stiff. And sometimes even if I manually put it in the correct position, it pops back. That's why it's not knitting. Levers like this are operated by springs, and I know from experience, one possibility is that there is something wrong with the spring, or it's become distorted or detached, but mine appears to be in good shape and connected on both ends properly. So I'm thinking the problem may be debris and stickiness around the post. Let's see what Jack says.
All right, so what we're going to do is get the top off the carriage so we can work from both sides.
Jack just flicked that off so fast. Let me show you a little bit more slowly. Past 10 and lift it off, just like the Singer Studio machines.
These two screws, one here, and this one, if you'll notice, is in an adjustable slot, which means get your top on, get it lined up, tighten this one first, because this one has only one position it can be in.
Oh, so they built in a potential adjustment.
Yes. And just for everybody's information, my yes at seeing that is from our favorite show from Australia. Instead of saying yes, they say yes. All right, so here are our slides. We move them carefully. And we want to see, yes, the springs are in place. Now, this one looks a little rough. You can see it's expanded right there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been stretched, but I think that's probably because this flipper's sticking and the spring is trying to pull it back and it can't. This one is perfect. Just so you can see what the difference is, I'll stretch them both out. And you can see right next to my finger, there's wide spots in that one.
Right.
Okay, but they're both there, they're both working, so that's not the problem. All right. I can't work in this position, but I'm going to turn around and show you that there is a little circlip right there. This is called an outside retractable circlip. And we have a special set of pliers that will go in those two little holes right there and spread this open so that we can get it off. And then we can start disassembling this flipper. And we have to take this circlip off, but you can see that's easy peasy. My little flat screwdriver will pop that off. Don't lose the order of the washers under any of these because they're very important. This is a pair of these pliers that would push together a circlip. See, they would catch it like that, and as you squeeze, it would close it in. That would be for one inside of a groove. And the way these work is you loosen this screw, and any one of them will have this position to do this, or this position to spread that clip. And what you do is match up the tip size to the hole as much as possible. And I'm using these offsets Once I get it in there, I'll turn it so the camera can
Actually,
see.
I can see.
Okay, and look at there. We're out of there. So all I got to do now is get these ends loose so that we can take this whole flipper assembly out. So, all right, we've spread it out and flexed it a little bit, and then it has to come out from behind the post. And I'll take my pliers and squeeze that back to the right configuration. You can do that about 3 times with one of these, and then you must replace it, so it would be a trip to Fastenal.
Jag wants to be sure that you know to take the hardware from each area and put it in a distinct spot and organize it in the exact order it came off so as to be able to reassemble it in the correct order with everything in its original place.
Just so you see, this is an odd beast here. It's an eccentric. So we're going to have to be very careful when we put it back in to match it up to the way that it was. The screw we just took out, this is its nut plate, and it's actually a guide for this stitch size. This is the post that your stitch size dial rotates in and out. So this is its normal movement, and we're trying to get this off so we can free this flipper.
And then another circlip coming off?
Yes. Now I'm going to show you what the problem here is by showing you what this one does. Watch. Easy peasy. That comes out, and there's my post. So this should come out just like that did.
But it isn't.
I know, so I'm going to have to persuade it just a little bit. I hope that's all it takes. And the problem being, let me see if I can show the camera. Here's one post, and that looks pretty good.
Yeah, you can see it's oily, but
Right.
it should be.
And here's the other post, and that looks pretty good. Okay, so the problem is this bushing area. Right. And now we can see the construction. This bushing area that we're wanting to get to run a brass file down inside is part of this slide mechanism. So what we've got to do is on this side, and you can see clearly now. There you go. That's how that works. And then you turn it loose, and it's ready. So what we're seeing is the problem is in this bushing post. And so we've got to go in and clean it up, and we'll wipe this off a little bit. You can see this is good. All I'm doing is changing direction, and it is rotating freely.
And that's the one that works properly.
Yeah, this is bad.
Okay,
See,
how much pressure does it take to make it do what it's supposed to?
Right there, it is stiff as all get out. And here's the thing to remember, that when they're under the carriage, they only move a certain few degrees every time they move.
Mm-hmm.
So that means any crud that gets on the back side, see, I'm having trouble getting it out. Watch.
It just builds up, doesn't it?
Yes, yes. Again, fibers, any contaminants. Now see, if I press from the bottom, it'll come out. So what we're going to do is clean this post, but I'm afraid what we need to do most is clean inside that bushing post.
No problem.
Yep. And you can't see anything.
Well, Jack worked on the post and the bushing. I did a little bit of cleaning on the surface of the carriage, the part that's normally hidden by the plastic layer. Okay.
All right, what you'll find out when you do this is that the restriction is almost always at that base section where the flipper post contacts the bushing post. And so that's where you really want to concentrate your efforts, is down here. It needs to be said, in case you don't know, some people saw with a file, and you can't control what you're doing. When you're working with something small, you want to stroke with the file so that you're making an even movement from one end to the other. And you can change directions and go the other way. But what we want to concentrate on is this lower section right here and this face. You can have a ridge on this face right there, and you don't want that to happen. And again, you don't want to change the dimension of this. You just want to clean it. If you
I would guess that you shouldn't do this if there's a different solution, because you do risk compromising the part.
That's true. That's true. And let me show everybody. These are called needle files. And you can get them online, or you can get them at some specialty stores. But they're really, really good about this kind of stuff. You can't put enough pressure on it to ruin
it's
your
hard
post.
to ruin the steel
Right.
post with it. Well,
Now,
that's good.
There's an edge right there on the file that is one set of serrations, whereas these are doubled. They go in two directions. This is only one. So what we're going to do is try to hold it flat against the post and use that little tiny edge to very carefully stroke around and around, and we'll get rid of any possible distortion. I just got through saying you don't saw with a file, you stroke with a file. But since we're working on an inside diameter, I'm stroking in that, and then I'm just pulling it back out. And what you want to do is stroke into it with a twist, so that you're not making a groove, you're circling the bushing inside circumference. So I'll do that a few times, and I'll test. You can normally feel a rough spot where the file wants to grab if there is a distortion in there. But remember, you can see that mark right there. That's a wear pattern, and that means that this is the contact surface that the flipper rides on. That's why we clean this, and I will also clean that so that it's smooth. Since we're working with two things, we're working with the bushing post and the base post. This is the one from the good side. Now look, this is the bad bushing post.
Or was.
But now this tells me the problem, if it's
the remaining problem, if it exists.
The rest of the problem. Now here's our test. This goes in fine, but it's not anywhere near as loose.
So that still needs a little bit of work on the post.
But now we know it's the flipper post. It's not the bushing. So let's concentrate on this very slowly, and then we'll try to get it just like this one.
That's the correct post all fixed.
Yep, that is how we're supposed to do. Now it should actually, and it's doing it, it's dropping according to gravity. And I will say, this was the first horse in the stable, and it has been used a lot. So you would, first diagnosis on a new machine or a lightly used machine would be either crud or corrosion. But distortion can occur over long periods of use. So don't grab the file first. What we did was we used the file. We finished up, because a file makes marks on the metal. It'll clean it, but the hazard is it leaves marks, and so the steel wool around and around that post.
Buffed out the marks.
Right, buffed out any marks that we might have had.
And then we clean, of course, that makes its own debris. Little teeny metal filings.
Right. So then we wash it down with the LPS1. We clean the interior of the bushing post, and then we can begin to reassemble.
Mostly, you just reassemble in the reverse order of disassembling. But Jack does have a few tips for you.
This is what you look for. This little cutout left an impression on the base of the bed, so we know pretty much what direction to put this eccentric into. And if I move it just a hair, you can see there's a line up mark because there's a little difference in the color. This is how it should move. However, this little square piece isn't square, so be careful if you take it out. We talked about lining up the eccentric. it also has to fit its little footprint, but it's wider in this dimension front to back than it is side to side. Again, I put it in the wrong way the first time, and it froze this up. So be careful that before you tighten anything, you make sure everything is moving freely. And you spread it just far enough to slip it down, and then wiggle it, rotate it so you know it's down in its little groove. You can see the groove on this side. And all you do is just press it down and rotate it around the groove. Let me get my little extra fingers here. There you go. See, now you know it's in the groove if it'll rotate. No. This fits here, and you can tell because there's an offset. So it goes around the base, moves very nicely. This is our problematic post.
Was.
Right. Now, remember, this is the side that's the stitch length side, and this is our spring post. So it goes in this way. All right, we have this side back together. Again, I will point out, this is the post that sets the stitch length. And here is your spring post for that flipper, that problematic flipper. What you have to do is make sure, since this flipper goes around the base of the post of this flipper, it's not going to go through far enough to get your circlip on this side. It may take just a tap or two, and make sure this is still moving freely, but look at your two surfaces right here and make sure they're right on top of each other, like we showed you before we put it in. Because this little guy will flip around and get off center to this post. So, putting them back on in the order that they came off. Now I'll show you my trick for doing these, because if you turn it at an angle and get the circlip on the top, all right, here's the thing, you got to push on the back edge of the circlip with something pretty stout, but you can't get in the way of the teeth coming through over here. So what I use is a set of slip-jointed pliers
We cannot see you. You've got to move into the picture.
Pair of slip-jointed pliers. You see, no matter how you squeeze, they won't go all the way shut. And then you go in at an angle, catch the back of your clip and the top of the post. And it's easy peasy if you get it just right. We just put the spring on. Let's see how well we did. Well, my goodness, look at that. It's going back on the return spring just like it's supposed to. So I'm thinking we've cured that problem. We've got to put this circlip on. And here's another little one of my tips. This is a smaller circlip. And again, we're going to put it at an angle. This time I'm going to aim it towards you. And we get it flat. And for this, the pliers are really too bulky. So what I use is a small pad of hemostats that are slightly magnetic. So one finger holds, and then you pop it into place. And again, if it'll circle,
that's how you know it's seated.
It's in the groove. On these, always squeeze the tips together just a little bit to make sure you've got it seated. There you go. We're adjusting the stitch length. That's moving the posted flipper like it's supposed to. And here's its anchor position here. And look, it's moving these guys. So here's the smallest stitch or the largest stitch, and release. Other side of the stitch dial, and release. So I think we've cured it.
Now let's test it on the machine. Both sides are set to 1, so both should extend the needles into knitting position and then pull them back, and they did. That should slip to the left, knit to the right, and it is, yay. Now let's change to slip both directions, and it is doing so. And the big trouble that we were having was returning to work, but it's doing it properly. Knitting both directions again. Now I can make socks.